Juliet, hello.
Hello, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm super excited. It was so fun and motivating to read your book, Built to Move, as my little research project before we chatted. And I've been watching your Insta, and I I love about this book that I've just read. 10 tests, 10 physical practices, 10 ways to make your body better. And it had a whole different take from any other kind of fitness material I've ever read in my life. How did you do
Well,
that in 2023? Like, it's
yeah.
amazing.
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that because that actually was one of the goals of this book. And we worked really hard to make sure it didn't become like a traditional fitness and exercise book. We even have this sort of alternative, kind of like Keith Haring inspired cover, because
Mm,
to the extent that we wanted to create this sort of like feeling around the book, that it wasn't your traditional health and fitness book with like someone lifting or moving on the front. Like we really wanted to kind of create an ethos around the book that was like, hey, this isn't like your other health and fitness books. And we decided also that we wanted to make it fun
mm,
and interactive. We wanted it to be the kind of book that you could put on your coffee table, that your kids might pick up and try some of the tests, that you could give it to your friends and neighbors, and that you could compare notes. And we also wanted it to sort of be like an at-home physical because we go to our doctors for this thing called a physical, but it turns
mm,
out there's really nothing physical in a physical anymore. A physical is a lot of blood work and other things, which of course are very related to our physical health, but it's not a physical in that it's not testing any of our physical capabilities as a human. And we felt
mm,
like there were these essential things that human beings are supposed to be able to do with their bodies. They're all very interconnected. And there was no real clear resource about it. And when we chose the 10 things, we had a few key things in mind. We wanted them all to be evidence based.
mm,
We wanted them to be accessible. So we wanted people to be able to do these tests and practices with very little to no money
mm.
on their living room floor
Yeah, that's
without,
what really stood out for me. It
yes,
was a call to anyone to just
anyone.
get mobile. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the third sort of criteria for these 10 tests was, is it actionable? Can
Mm.
you actually get better at it? Because, the last thing we wanted to do was put a book out in the world where we said, okay, we'll do all these tests and now feel bad about yourself because you failed them all. We wanted to have them be decidedly actionable so that you could do the tests and then you could follow our advice on the practices and you could actually see improvement. Because
Mm.
as you know, in any health practice, you want to see progress, whether it's a diet or any other health and fitness regime. If you're lifting weights, you want to see your muscles get bigger. If you're on a diet, you want to lose weight. Well, it's the same thing with these physical practices. Human beings want to see improvement, and once you see improvement, you can be sold. And so
Mm.
we really set out to say, hey, what are these simple and actionable things that people can do that they can ideally revisit a couple of times a year in their as part of their practice, and almost give themselves an at-home physical. And what has been so fun about this is the number of people who've done exactly what I said earlier, which is, oh my God, I did the sit and rise test against my kids, and I'm brushing my teeth on one foot nowadays. And just hearing how people are incorporating these little actions into their lives, which maybe in and of itself as a solo action might seem very minor, but really in the aggregate can have a really big impact on your health and wellness. So that was a long way around saying thank you for noticing that we were trying to not make a traditional fitness book.
Yeah, no, I definitely noticed. And I love that you said, it might seem minor because I really wish we could cure this human inadequacy in our thinking of, oh, like it's just one thing, so it doesn't matter. Or it's just like, that's like quitting using straws, but there's 8 billion of us also using straws. And like if we all did it, that would actually be really great for the sea turtles. Or, and you can extrapolate that it actually matters thinking. To create huge change across a number of things in our world if we actually just shifted our mindset around the little things mattering.
I think you're right. One example I think about, and a mindset shift maybe I can help some of your listeners have from listening to this, is the idea that exercise has to happen in a 1 hour increment.
Yeah.
We have taught this to everybody that it only counts if it's an hour. Most are an hour if you go or CrossFit or Orange Theory, or so it's an hour, and then you've got to build in time before and after. Just a simple mindset shift that 5 minutes does matter and counts. 10 minutes matters and counts. I love to tell everybody about this workout that my husband and I created when our children were really small. And, everybody knows when you have small children, it's hard to exercise.
Yeah.
And I'll say, as a subtext, we actually owned a gym at this time, and it was still really hard for us to exercise.
Oh my
We
gosh. Well, that makes the rest of us feel slightly less inadequate. Thank you for sharing.
So we created this workout called the 10 10 10 at 10. And it was 10 air squats,
Mhm.
10 push-ups, 10 sit-ups, 10 sort of body weight movements
Yeah.
that we would perform for 10 minutes at 10 o'clock at night, because that's when we actually found ourselves with a few minutes to just get a little bit of exercise in. Were we going to go to the Olympics on the 10 10 10 at 10? No. But guess what? It counted, and it kind of kept our irons hot in terms of our health and fitness at a time in our lives when we really didn't have much of it to, much either time or actually just physical capacity and mental capacity
Yeah.
to work out. And I think what we learned from that is, and now I think the term that people are using these days is movement snacks. I think that's a term I've heard being thrown around as movement snacks, and that is just doing little, bursts of exercise or stretching or mobility or balance work or whatever in small increments. But again, I think what you said earlier is this idea of the aggregate. Thinking about things in the aggregate is so important. If you do, we have this mantra because we're the mobility people, that's what we're known for, is that if you mobilize 10 minutes a day, it can make a big difference.
Yeah.
Well, on any given day, you might only have time to mobilize your calves in 10 minutes. And so you might think, and what good is it going to do? I only had time to mobilize my calf. But you know what? If you do 10 minutes a day, 4 or 5 days a week, that's 40 minutes, upwards of an hour of really positive input you can put into your body in just 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I think, I love what you're saying about a mindset shift, because I think that's one of the things I'm hoping to help people do, is shift their mindset about what counts as movement, what counts as health, what counts as healthy behaviors, into realizing that there's so many small things that you can do that make a huge difference.
So many small things. I do 10 squats every time I boil the kettle. I'm a massive tea drinker and a writer and a podcaster. So there is some sitting, of course.
Yes.
But at the same time, every time I get up to make myself a tea, I do my 10 squats. And it's a non-negotiable. It's just what happens as soon as I flick the switch of the kettle. And, we know what 10 squats can do for blood sugar, insulin regulation, just 10 squats. Apparently, some research Rhonda Kirkpatrick just brought out, I was watching her talk about it the other day. It's like better for your blood sugar regulation than a 30-minute walk. How's that, right?
It's
And
so
you might
cool.
think, oh, 10 squats, that's nothing. I'm not doing anything. But actually,
Well, and imagine you're doing that multiple times a day if you're drinking multiple cups of tea.
oh, I
And
am.
then you're, me too. Yeah. For me,
Mm,
it's coffee, but you're sort of like amortizing that out over weeks, months, years. Think
yeah.
about how many squats that is.
Mm,
And it's, it's so good for your brain and your body, and you get your blood moving after sitting for a long time. And it's just this little thing. And the other thing that I love about hearing that you do that is that one of the things I'm such a fan of, and I'm hoping I can help people figure out ways to do it, is finding ways to do things else. So you're already, one of the things that I love about what you said is that you've figured out a way to incorporate a behavior, habit, whatever you want to call it, while you're doing something else. And I think this is really important for people to think about, because again, we all are limited in our time and capacity to do more. But oftentimes if you can stack a healthy habit behavior like your 10 squats on top of something else you're already doing, which is making tea, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's such a win.
It is. And I think like, you know, I used to have to make time in my mind to exercise. Like you said, this magical 1 hour, where did that come from? I mean, none of our ancestors were thinking, hang on,
Nope.
we got to get out there for an hour. It's just incorporating exercise and movement through our days. And I want your help in defining something that really was very clear for me in that book, but in all the work you do, which is this focus on mobility specifically, and how that differs from words like exercise and fitness.
Sure. So I'll give you our definition of mobility, which is the ability to move freely through your environment without and do the things you want to do with your body. Now, that is free form. Everybody has very different movement goals. Some of us like to do yoga or run or you name it. I mean, and if your movement goal is just to be able to play with your grandchild, that's still a movement goal, in terms of things that count, like that counts. But mobility is having the range of motion in your joints so that you can be as pain-free as possible, underscoring that pain is part of the human condition and we will all experience some, but as pain-free as possible, and be able to move freely through your environment so you can do the things that you love to do. And we, of course, are biased, but we think it is the most underappreciated thing. We all talk about these pillars of health, and we think mobility should be one of them. Because, unlike some of the other parts of our physiology, like our muscle mass and our bones, which we are all learning more and more, start to decline naturally as we age, and we're sort of in a fight against time to keep as much muscle mass on our bodies and as much bone density as we can. Our mobility actually does not have to decrease as we age, but it does if we don't put a little bit of attention into it on a regular basis. And what we found, though, is that just spending 10 minutes a day on your living room floor at night, doing some soft tissue work, or, sitting cross-legged on the floor, or doing a variety of very easy, accessible mobility exercises can really make a big difference in not only how you feel in your day-to-day life, but your ability to do the things you love physically even better. And also to be able to continue doing those things as long as you live. So we think this mobility piece is such an important part of having a durable body. And durability is a word that I'm obsessed with over longevity. But, my personal goal is to have a durable body, and mobility is a key part of that. So I don't know what the data is where you live, but in America, the biggest reason, the worst case scenario for an older person is to fall. That's if you fall, chances are over a certain age, you're going to die within 2 years. I mean, it's a very grim statistic. And there are a variety of reasons why older adults fall, but one of them, and a critical one, is a loss of mobility. And so, someone who's listening to this who's 30 is probably not going to be motivated at 30 by not falling when they're 65. But there are so many reasons why at our age, or whatever age you are, that your mobility matters, whether it's to be better at your sport, whether it's to move freely through your environment, whether it's to experience. The other thing that I love about mobility is that, again, it's a tool. You can really take a crack at working on your own body in 10 minutes a night on your living room floor. So it's ultimately very accessible.
Which also means you could even do it while you had that Netflix series on.
Wouldn't you know, we love to say that because in the US, the data shows that we are watching an average of 3 hours a day of television.
Wow, 3 hours?
Yep, it's not great. And so, we again, in the spirit of trying to stack behaviors, we love watching Netflix. I mean, Kelly and I, we always have a show going on.
So do we. And I think there's this whole poo-poo of television in this black and
No.
white way. You're either in the club that's like dead against it, or you're the couch potato. And like, why can't we actually just have a show we enjoy and watch actors do crazy good things on screens? And I think, yeah, I agree. But we often do our stretching, like after tennis or whatever, we'll be stretching on the floor watching whatever we're watching.
Yeah, and I think I by the way, first of all, completely agree with you. I really try not to be a black and white person. And I think that's one of the big sort of challenges with our current health and fitness environment.
It
It's all or
is.
nothing. And
Mm.
I'm hoping to be someone that comes right down the middle. And I feel the same way about TV. I mean, I enjoy watching a little bit of TV at night. I find that it calms my mind and it's just sort of a way to like, end the night. But even just the fact that you sit on the floor, that's like a secret mobility practice. You're getting up and down off the floor to get to the floor. You're
Mm.
probably sitting cross-legged. You're adopting different positions as you're working on stretching. And, that is like a body. And again, you're doing it while you're doing something else that you really enjoy, which is watching a little night.
Yeah, absolutely. So good. And so I want to ask you if exercise came naturally for you, because I know you are an athlete. Do we say ex-athlete? I don't want to get that wrong. Is one
No,
always a professional athlete if one has been at one particular time?
well, it's a great question. Someone asked me about recently sort of like what is an identity question. And they
Mm,
asked if I still considered athlete to be one of my identities. And I do, but I don't consider myself to be a professional athlete. There was a
hmm
point in my life where I was a professional athlete and that's what I was doing. And I was trying to make money doing it. And I was competing at a national and international level. And so I'm definitely an ex-professional athlete, but I consider myself a lifelong athlete.
hmm And a pretty cool sport. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I was involved. Well, just to backstory a little bit, I was a Division I rower in high
Mm.
school, a Division I rower in college at UC Berkeley. But then during my college time, I became a river rafting guide, and
Hmm.
I wanted, if you could have like a little camera inside my 19, I wanted to be outside. I wanted to have a job that was fun and I could enjoy the outdoors. And so river rafting fit the bill and in my 19-year-old mind. So I became a river rafting guide in the summers during college. But I had the opportunity right after college to try out for the extreme whitewater team, which was sort of this perfect marriage of my background, being a suffer athlete as a rower, and
Mm.
then my experience running, class 4 and 5 rivers all over California. And so, I, on a whim, went and tried out for this team that was filled with some of the most legendary Hall of Fame whitewater women on earth, many of whom were, 5 and even 10 years older than me. I was by far the youngest member of the team during that
Hmm.
time. And I went on a whim to try out for the team. And, 3 months later, I was competing at my first national championships. And, 8 months later, I was competing at my first world championships on the Zambezi River in Africa. And
Wow.
so, it's a very fringe sport. Um,
I had, I mean, it's probably because it never gets broadcast on TV, but I had genuinely never heard of it as just an Aussie who lives in a city.
yeah,
And it's
yeah. Well,
amazing.
it
It
turns out
sounds
our biggest,
so
our biggest
adventurous.
our biggest competitors were the Kiwis and the Aussies. But I
Really?
can tell you that, in Eastern Europe and in many parts of Asia, it's a really big sport, a sport that's
Yes,
funded
I
by, it's
was,
like funded by their governments. They've
uh-huh.
considered having it be an exhibition sport at the Olympics. And so it's just this very strange sport that I got involved in. And it was great because I was given this amazing, all of the competitions took place on all these class 5 rivers all over the world. So I had this amazing opportunity to travel on someone else's dime in my 20s and
Mm.
explore all these insane rivers and, have the opportunity to just sort of experience what it's like to be a full-time athlete and, travel the world. I was so broke. I mean, broke is, everything I owned lived in my 1986 Subaru. And, but I was happy as a clam, just, figuring out how to be a professional athlete and making
Yeah.
ends meet. And it was a great time. It was really fun.
How special. And do you think some of us are born wanting to move more than others? Because some people really seem to struggle with a motivation piece. And I often, like, I've interviewed over 400 doctors and scientists and all sorts of people now. So I often wonder whether part of that is actually just not growing up with it modeled, and therefore you don't have the chemicals going through your brain and body that make you connect to exercise feeling good from a very early age. And then whether some of us have the genetic piece, some of us might have, I don't know, like had injuries when we were young or illness, and therefore we just got framed as not being a sporty kid. And then those
Right.
things get imprinted psychologically. I'd love your take. You've obviously, I mean, you've run CrossFit franchises and all sorts of things in fitness. What are some of the patterns you see between the people for whom movement sticks and for who finds it harder, and how they might be able to actually cross into the world of, oh, I want to do this. I feel drawn to move.
Sure. And I love this question because I think it's so important. And, I have heard the same thing you've heard, that there is potentially some people have some genetic drive to move, and that drive may be higher in some people than others. And if that's the case, my guess is I have that because I definitely feel this strong desire to move. But I think it's a couple of things. I think the modeling is a huge part of it. And I grew up with two parents who, by the way, neither of whom would have described themselves as athletes, and they weren't going to the gym in traditional senses, but they were always moving. They were on random volleyball teams. My dad and mom were big hikers. The kinds of vacations we did often involved doing some physical activity outside, like fishing or hiking or camping. But they were just consummate movers. And I've actually talked about both of them quite a bit on my Instagram because they've now both reached their 80s. And I think it's so cool to see these two people who never did any kind of formal program. They weren't doing like a squat program, programmed by this super secret squirrel coach and going to the gym 2 days on, 1 day off. They weren't doing any of that. They just were moving a lot in ways that made them feel good and that they enjoyed, and in ways where they could connect with community. So I think being, witnessing that was a huge part of it. I learned early on that being outside and moving my body made me feel good.
Yeah.
And was a really critical way for me to connect with other people, which is, I think, one of these big missing pieces of it. I have this theory that human beings do two things together. We eat together and we move together. And one of the most important ways that we can connect with others is moving. And that could just be a simple walk around the block, or, a hiking trip, or, again, there's 1,000 ways we can move together. As a parent myself, I am a huge believer in modeling. And what we did with our kids was, and one of my parenting strategies is to sort of create broad guardrails, but within that, give my kids a ton of choice. And one of the things that I did as a parent consciously was decide that we value movement as a family, that all human beings need to move, but how you want to move is really personal. So we told our kids from the beginning, we move in this family, and moving or not moving is not a choice. So in our household, it's not a choice to be a couch potato. That's not a choice. But how you want to move, sky's the limit. Like, we will support if you want to, hang from, the curtains on the ceiling, if you want to do dance, martial arts, team sports, individual sports, we were like, we will support any movement interest you have, wide ranging. And our kids tried it all. They both did ballet and martial arts and gymnastics and CrossFit and soccer and softball. And so we really created an environment where we supported this movement. And so, to answer your original question, I believe that all humans have a desire and need to move somewhere. And I think the problem is that people really, how you want to move your body is so personal.
Yeah.
And so I think oftentimes it's like a square peg in a round hole, where you might say, okay, well, all my friends go to CrossFit, but when I go to CrossFit, I have a horrible experience. And then you think, I must have no genetic drive to move.
Yeah,
right? When
exactly.
really,
Keep
Russell,
going, keep trying.
keep trying. And I don't think that that exercise needs to end for kids. So if you didn't grow up in a place where choosing a movement practice was, was encouraged in the way that we do, you can still do that as an adult. And I found that all adults, there's something for everybody. I really believe that. And then the final thing I'll say, as parents, that I actually recently did a post about this. We seem to bucket our kids, and I don't know if it's the same in Australia, but here we seem to do one of two things with our kids. Your kid is either sporty or they're creative.
Mm. Yeah.
And
What
right,
is that? Yeah.
right. And we actually had someone come up to us recently and say, "Well, do creatives also need to move?" And I was like pulling my hair out because yes, the answer is yes. Even if your kid is drawn towards drumming or the arts or any creative pursuit, like amazing, but unfortunately, those kids also still need to move their body.
Mm.
It's not optional for them. Like just because your passion lies in playing the piano, which is amazing,
Mm.
you also still need to find a way to move your body. And so I don't know why we've done that, like patterning, right? Like you're either
Yeah.
one or the other. There's so few kids that are crossed over. So
Mm.
I don't know if you see that in your community or, among your listeners or, larger group, but I've seen this weird pattern we have where it's like, you're an athlete or you're creative, and the creatives, you don't need to move.
Yeah,
So
no. I proudly call ourselds a blended family.
but I
We do
really
both.
think I could, yeah, you do both
Mm.
and experiment, experiment, experiment,
Mm.
and I really believe everyone can find some way to move their body that they enjoy.
Yeah, 100%. I want to talk to you about midlife,
Mm.
and I will be vulnerable here and share a scenario where I was super fit. 2 years ago, I was playing tennis 4 times a week at competition level. I'd got myself up to grade one. My metabolism had finally started to play ball with me again in midlife. And then I was taking my dog for a pee one night. He saw a rat. He's a hunting dog that is 43 kilos. And I was stepping over a cement step right at that moment. And my foot did something no human foot should ever have to do.
Ugh.
And I fractured my fifth metatarsal. And unbelievably, since then, I am shocked at how much mobility I have lost in a year. Everything hurts. Now I have tennis injuries everywhere. And I know that part of that is the estrogen leaving the building, and I'm exploring how that might need to play out for me. Because again, like you, I'm not a black and white person. I don't think that midlife is either you're the natural run to the fields and become a shaman type, or do all the HRT. And like I think you can actually have interesting middle of the road experiences where you explore whatever's going to make you thrive through midlife. So I'm in that stage. But pain is really interesting to me now because I haven't been able to play proper tennis for 6 months with a tendon thing that no one seems to be able to find out what is wrong. And then, like, I do a split step one night and then I can't move for 3 days. It's hectic, and it all came from this fall. So, when you said it's the older people who have, like, I mean, obviously that's more of a mortality
Right.
situation. I think midlife women, and I've spoken to so many women who've had like that one thing happen and then all of a sudden, your body just does not work and everything feels like it's falling apart. It's quite a challenging psychological experience. But for people who probably need to move more and preserve muscle more now than ever, it's really annoying. I'm just annoyed
Oh,
now. I'm angry. Tell us.
oh my God. I mean, first of all, I have to just
I had to
emphasize.
share it because
I have
I
to,
know there are lots of stories out there like it.
oh my
So,
gosh, I have you because I am 51 years old. I am
mhm.
in the throes of menopause. In fact, when you said the words estrogen leaving your body, I had like a physical reaction to it, because I think
I'm
my
sorry, I
body is like,
triggered you.
yeah,
Yeah.
my body was like, yes, I would love to have some estrogen come into the body, like across this Zoom. But yeah, I mean, I think it is a really difficult time for women. And I think these, like sort of nagging little injuries can actually have a cascading impact.
Mm,
And, I mean, I'm sure you have friends like I do who've had frozen shoulder.
yeah,
I haven't had anything as significant as a full break like you had, but I felt like up until I was 47 years old, pretty much injury free. I mean, I had
same.
a few nagging things here and there, but nothing really significant. And then since that time, and I'm assuming it's in connection with this perimenopause and menopause transition, that I now, doing many of the same things I was doing before. I tweaked my wrist. I came home from a workout the other day and told my husband I was sure I'd broken my wrist doing some weightlifting move. And, my calf is currently tweaked. And so, I think for many of us, we're in a phase now of, okay, we're in a season of our life where, and you're exactly right. Maybe it's because estrogen's leaving the body. Maybe it's because we're losing muscle mass, or our bones aren't as, sturdy as they were once before. But we're now facing this new season of injuries in our lives. And it really has become, for many of us, sort of okay, how do I mitigate this? Because
Mm,
it's probably not all going to go away. And maybe taking HRT does make some of it go away for some people. But, again, that's another controversial topic.
mm,
um, so I think from my perspective, it is about doing our best to, do things like lift weights, keep an eye on our sleep as much as we can between hot flashes. And then I think one big thing and a missing piece for this age group, and I think all age groups, but I do think could really help a lot, is this mobility piece.
yeah.
And I think it's not something that people turn to very often. I think most people have heard, okay, nutrition, sleep, lift weights, maybe consider HRT if your symptoms are really bad. But I don't think the mobility piece is talked about enough. And I do
Mm,
think that at least can potentially make a difference in all these sort of nagging pain and injury.
mm,
There is a lot of work that people can do on their own bodies that they can really make a difference in pain. And I'll see if I can describe a technique that we tell people a lot. It's called upstream and downstream. So you have your major joints in your body. And often that's where pain is occurring. People have hip pain, knee pain, ankle pain, but they have pain in other places in their body. And one of the things we recommend people do that turns out to be quite effective is think about your body as a system of systems and work upstream and downstream of where you are experiencing pain in your body. And so if you have knee pain, upstream of that are your quads and your VMO and your hamstrings, and downstream of that are your shins and your calves and your ankles. And there's a lot of soft tissue work and rolling that you can do on your own body without seeing a physician or a physical therapist or a chiropractor or a massage therapist. There's a lot you can do on your own body with this upstream downstream concept to really take a crack at managing some of this pain. Because
mm,
like you said, it really can have a cascading impact.
yeah.
And then it has this secondary effect of taking you out from the thing that you love doing.
Mm.
Probably is also really good for your mental health.
It's so
Um,
good. I've really noticed it. I'm like,
yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's
there's so much you can do it. And if I could tell a quick story about this, we
please
started
do.
our company originally in 2009. It was called Mobility WOD, and we've since changed the name to the Ready State. But it started because
Good
we owned.
choice. Good choice.
Thank
I
you.
love
Thank you.
that.
The mobility
Mm.
WOD. It would seem so clever in 2009 and was like, it became the dumbest name. So anyway, we at this time also owned a commercial gym. It was a CrossFit gym, and we had an in-house physical therapy clinic inside.
Hmm.
And what we started seeing in our physical therapy clinic was people were coming to us with a whole host of nagging pains and injuries. And by the way, I'm not talking catastrophe. So if you've broken your leg or torn your ACL, I'm not talking to you right now. I'm talking about the everyday aches and pains and sort of niggling things that bother all of us and often
Yeah.
take us out of doing our sports. we would see tons of those people in our clinic. They would have, in order to see us, they'd have to take 2 or 3 hours off of work during the workday, pay us out of pocket $200 or $300 an hour to see one of our top level physical therapists. And oftentimes we would leave and their diagnosis was something as simple as you're missing a little bit of hip range of motion, or your calves are so
Mm,
stiff that they're pulling on your knee and they're causing your knee to have pain. And what we saw was that, I mean, this was something like 80% of our clientele
yeah.
had pain and injury that we truly believed, if they had some tools and strategies and a couple of simple things on their living room floor, could make a huge difference in their mobility and their pain at home on their own. And so
Mm.
that was the birth of our company. And I think as we look at women in midlife, there's a lot of things, unfortunately, we're all having to double down on to survive this midlife transition. And none of us really have the energy to double down that much
I
on
know, they
anything.
throw it all at you. I was laughing with
Ah,
my teen, who's nearly 15, and he's a gorgeous boy, and we talk a lot because he's an only child as well. So I think that kind of amplifies how much adult time he gets. And so he's got some really beautiful insights in life. And he's like, Mom, it's really unfair that they make you guys go through this, like the women, and us go through puberty at the same time. Like we're all crazy. Like, boom, write a
yeah,
book.
you're like, done. You're like, mic drop. Yeah. Well, can I just say that I love teenage. I have a 15-year-old as well, and I have a
Oh,
19-year-old, and I love teenagers.
me too.
People don't, they get a bad rap, I think, teenagers, but they often can say these amazing, thoughtful, insightful things,
Mm,
and they aren't as cynical as we all are and
yeah.
pessimistic. And, they just can bring this sort of like lightness and energy and perspective that is
Mm,
so cool. So I love teenagers and I love what he said.
so good. And so pain and psychology then, like when we're doing mobility work, can you help us think about where a line might arrive where we're like, oh, nope, that's a health professional thing? And
Yeah.
like, obviously we're not talking breaks. Breaks are
Right.
definitely like ED, doctor, moon
Right.
boots, and all that jazz. But about those niggles, because I often feel like we're more scared of any kind of pain than we need to be half the time in terms of something we feel like. I was doing, just some really very simple dumbbell weight arm exercises the other day, and I can do most of them, even with this weird tendon thing that's stopping me from playing overheads and serves in tennis. I can still do all my arm weights. I'm conscious
Yeah.
that that's there, but these weights are not aggravating the situation the way serving a ball in a court would
Right.
aggravate it. So I feel like
Yeah.
I'm safe to do that. And
Yeah.
often I think when I'm talking to people, oh no, I can't do that because the hip, or I can't do that because the arm, or like
Yeah.
that's going to make things worse. And like we're almost scared, and I'm curious about how much that then plays into the perpetuation of pain syndromes.
Oh, I mean, I think you're so right. I think one of the biggest challenges that we see is even post-surgically, so many people are told not to move at all. And we're so of the mind that you've got to keep moving, and that moving is actually one of the, and moving, of course, you don't want to disrupt your surgical site and you want to be moving in pain-free ranges, but that movement is such a critical piece of healing from injury.
Mm,
And I same is true for a lot of these niggling things. Obviously there's certain injuries where, your body may just need to be given some space to heal, or if you're dealing with a more catastrophic injury. But, what I hear when I am hearing this, sort of forearm situation you're having is when you're playing tennis, you're doing something at speed.
mm,
Versus if you're lifting some dumbbells, you're able to do that slowly and under control in a range of motion with that wrist and arm that feel comfortable for you. But I think that's such a critical thing because, the goal is to keep moving,
yeah.
and that we shouldn't fear pain. Pain is part of the human condition. And I think, speaking of the mindset shift, and this is not my phrase, and I don't know, I can't quote the person it is, but I've heard it a lot, and that is pain is a request for change.
Mm.
And when we approach pain from that perspective, it really changes how we approach it. And so if you know, let's just say I've actually had a little bit of a tweaked shoulder recently. I have been using the upstream and downstream model to work on my forearm, my biceps, my triceps, and then all of this musculature around my neck and scapula. Because what I'm trying to do is change this area in my shoulder. Maybe one of my tendons or ligaments or a muscle needs to be fed slack in some way in that area. But what I'm taking it is at a request for pain. I know that it's not a tear or something catastrophic that requires an MRI and professional help.
Mm.
And the other thing is, this is the place where we really like to incorporate breath work. So
Ooh, okay.
everybody's talking about breath work these days. And there's people who are experts on it. And, you know, we've all tried taping our mouths shut while we sleep. And, you know, there's a lot of talk and, you know, sort of excitement around breath work, and we're fans. The way that we incorporate breath work into our mobility work is that if you can't breathe into a position, you don't own a position. And so we do something called the 4-4-4 with all the soft tissue and mobility work, where you take a breath in for 4 seconds, you actually contract. So imagine if you have a foam roller underneath your calf, you're going to contract your calf into the foam roller, and then you're going to exhale for 4 minutes. And that is a way of telling your body that the thing that you're doing is safe. It's connecting your physical and mental, you know, it's making this physical and mental connection to this work you're doing. And
Mm.
so I think there's tools and strategies that people can use to sort of make the process of self-care not feel so scary. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
and also, and I think those things are, you know, change your mindset that pain is a request for change. There are a ton of things that you can do with soft tissue work and mobility work at home that are safe. That, you know, if you feel pain, real serious pain, you're going to know, and you should back off. And that if you can't breathe into a position, you don't own a position, and you can employ the 4-4-4. So 4 seconds in, contract over whatever tool you're using on whatever part of your body, and then 4 seconds out. And you'll find that you can usually, you know, get a little more motion and action into that soft tissue work you're doing. So there are some strategies to sort of deal with that fear around pain.
Mm.
Um, and
Yeah.
just make a little bit of change in how you think about it.
I remember I was a mad keen dancer when I was a kid, and I did like all the different kinds and hip hop and break dance and jazz and everything. And no, except ballet, that was way too strict for me. I kept getting told to put my butt in, and I could just never get it in quite like the teacher wanted, so I quit. But those beautiful modern dances where you had a lot more freedom, I remember part of our warm up, stretching, mobility was huge,
Oh,
and breathing into things was huge, so that you could get more flexibility, so that you could get into the splits. You can't just walk into a room when it's like 2 degrees outside and do the splits. You need
no.
you need to do a bit of work to get there.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, gosh, I'm never going to be able to do it like that girl can. But like 2 months later, I could, because I showed up every week and I was guided by my teacher, and I was breathing into it and releasing and taking 1 inch further. It's not rocket science, and it's been around for a long time. This stuff is tried and tested, and it's used on kids. So if it's safe for our
Seriously.
kids, we can all do it.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, you know, again, in the, you know, we talked about earlier about how, especially as women, there's just like, we don't have time to do one more thing. And so,
Mm,
you know, I don't have time to wake up in the morning and do like a 30-minute breath practice.
mm,
You know, I'm getting kids off to school and doing like mom stuff, and then trying to fit in my own healthy habits around the side of that. But one of
yeah.
the reasons that I love incorporating this breath work into my mobility practice is, again, here we go. Now I'm doing 3 things. You know, I'm watching Netflix. I'm doing some soft tissue work on my body. I'm getting a little breath work in. I usually do it right before I get to bed, and I find that has a very down regulatory, you know, the breath work combined with the mobility work right before I go to bed has a very down regulatory effect on me. So it helps me fall asleep. So it has this cascading impact of things. And again, it's not one more thing I have to do. I've just made the commitment that I'm going to do, 10, 20, 30 minutes while I'm watching a show of work body on my floor of my living room. I've gotten up and down off the floor in order to do it. And I'm preparing my body to go to sleep as well. So it has so many positive impacts.
And getting up and down, like down and up rather, on the floor, if someone had not done anything for yonks, maybe all they'd done is like some walking, and they're really keen to start building some mobility into their day. What does success look like with your very first go? Because I would imagine you being your encouraging self, now that we've chatted, it would be like leaning on the couch with one leg and, and just helping get yourself up. And that is okay, right? Because in the book, you talk about all these different stages of these movements. And every stage that you achieve and move beyond is success in itself. It's not just the success isn't just when you can get down and get up with your hands up in the air, for example.
No, progress is success. Well, I first of all think I would actually even go backwards. I think information is success because one of the things I like so much about the sit and rise test and why we put it as the first chapter of our book is that, as we've discussed, mobility is not at the top of mind for many people. And it's not that fun always, it's more fun
It
to
doesn't
go to
have
a
the
spinning
sexy
class.
badge of like,
It's not sexy.
the weights room, does it?
Yeah, it's not sexy. It doesn't play as well on Instagram as other fitness stuff. But it's so critical. And I think the reason we love that test and we loved opening the book with it is that it is so powerful to just get some pretty early information about where you are with your mobility. And I think the reason it's so important is that, we all as kids spent so much time getting up. I mean, I think the data is like toddlers get up and down off the ground like hundreds of times in a single day. So I think we can, when we perform that test on ourselves, we're able to remember like, it wasn't that long ago when I was a kid and in elementary or middle school or wherever, I did a ton of getting up and down off the ground and sitting comfortably on the floor. And that seems like something that humans should be able to do. So I think the first step is just getting that basic information about where you are without judgment. And knowing that any progress is improvement. The other thing I love about that test is, the way to get better at it is just to do it a little bit. So actually get up and down off the ground. And then back to what we're our favorite subject, watching Netflix, just sitting on the floor it's this tool that we like to use the word rewild our hips. But
I love that word.
Our hips get so stiff in modern life, doing all this sitting and commuting and driving around. We're sitting with our joints often at 90-degree angles, specifically our hips, which are just this big, huge, important mover. And tight hips are a common reason why a lot of people have low back pain, for example. And often that connection isn't made. But just the simple act of sitting on the floor, your brain and body will know to change positions, which is actually ideal. If you find yourself, if you commit to sitting on the ground for 30 minutes a night, you'll find that you sit for a few minutes with your legs long, sit straight out in front of you. You might move into 90-90, which is kind of a little side saddle position, sit cross-legged like you did in elementary school. And that's all good because what that is doing is rewilding your hips, moving your hips into these positions that they often don't ever get to experience in our sort of chair-bound world. And it can have this dramatic effect on how you feel. I mean, people run faster and feel better at their sport, and their low back pain starts to go away because it turns out that your low back is connected to your hips. And so if your hips are able to move in all the ranges that they're supposed to move, as opposed to just being at a 90-degree angle in a chair, it really has this like cascading positive effect about how you feel in your body. So I would say any progress is great. And, we have a lot of people who've taken our sit and rise test who have to actually take the test scaled, meaning they don't even lower themselves all the way to the ground. My mom, who's 78, She first did the test by lowering herself down to our coffee table so that it was safe for her. People can hang on to something. We want people to scale this test so that they can use it to get some information, and then just slowly but surely do some of the simple practices, and you will get better.
Yeah, you
Everybody
will.
gets better.
Yes, 100%. I agree with that big time. And so if you had to pick another one from your list of 10 to share with us, that people might get curious about in the week to come, what would you choose?
Well, I would choose balance, and something that we have in our book called the Old Man Balance Test.
Ooh, I'm so
Did you
glad you
see
brought
that
this one
one?
up, because I
Okay.
actually had it in my notes as one of my favorites, and it's actually something that I subconsciously do when I'm putting my tennis shoes on. So talk us through it.
Sure. So the Old Man Balance Test was a test developed by a friend and coach we know named Chris Hinshaw. And he
Hmm.
actually developed a test. He had at the time two teenage sons, and they got to the age where they were like better than him at every sport. And so he developed this test to try to beat them at
That's how
something.
I'm feeling about my teenager in tennis.
Yes.
I'm
I
like,
think
how
any
dare
parent,
you serve that well? Yeah.
yeah, they start surpassing you, and it's a bit of a blow to the ego. So he developed
Hmm.
this test to try to beat his two teenage sons. And I'll just describe the test really quickly. The idea is you stand with bare feet, your shoes and socks off and in front of you, and then you stand on one leg, and without ever putting your other leg down, you reach down and grab your sock and put on your sock. And then you reach down and grab your shoe and put on your shoe. And if it's a laced shoe, you tie your shoe. And then you put that foot down and switch and do it on the other side.
Mm.
So, what I love about this test is it, again, is this simple piece of information that lets you know where you are with your balance. And talking about things that are unsexy on Instagram, balance is possibly the most. I mean, it's even worse than mobility, because who wants to talk about balance? Nobody wants to go to a balance class. It's not cool. It doesn't look good on the internet. But I really believe balance is sort of like, this very important piece of longevity.
Hmm.
It's no surprise to me, and I don't know what the situation, I don't know, was it dark out when you broke your foot? Was it
It
dark?
was, yes.
Yeah. And so that's super common, actually. People often are injured, especially as we get older, in the dark.
Mm.
It's way more common because we lose some of these visual cues. And in your case, it was a strange accident with a rat and a dog, but often,
It was really freakish.
yeah, freak
Yeah. And
accident.
I've
But
got amazing bone density too. It's just so freaking annoying. But
it's
yes,
so annoying. It's
I'm
so
going to
annoying.
let that go.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's so annoying. I mean, I'm 100% with you. It's so annoying. But balance is this thing that nobody wants to practice, but we really
Mm.
need it. Mobility and balance are these two things that really allow us to be able to do the things we like to do as we get older.
Yeah.
Um, and also improve the things we do now, but nobody wants to practice balance. And so what I love about the Old Man Balance Test is it gives you some information about where you are, and all it's really telling you is, can you comfortably stand on one leg? Which,
Mm.
again, human beings should be able to stand on one leg for a little while. That's just a key element of balance. So it gives you a little bit of information, but it's also so fun because you can compete in it against your family members if you're so inclined to be a competitor. But I am
We
like,
absolutely are. I was doing it with my son yesterday. I'm like, I got one for you, sweetheart.
yeah, my husband and I, like, we try to do it for time, like who
Mm.
can, so we've taken it to the next level. But I will tell you that I do the Old Man Balance Test as a matter of course every morning. That's how I put on my shoes and socks.
Yeah.
So I make it a little game for myself because, again, I'm not going to go to a balance class. I might get a little bit of balance work in my yoga class. I like to mountain bike. So I might get a little bit of balance work just sort of built into the sports I like to do. But again, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time balance practicing, but I can wake up every day and I'm already putting on my shoes and socks, and I can just use 2 to 3 minutes in my day where I can practice putting on my shoes and socks and my balance all at once.
Mm. So good. And so I will share a video of that so that people know what I'm talking about. I'll link, because you guys had that on your Insta. And something I wanted to ask, because people might think 10 exercises and, oh, am I doing those every day? So just to give people the big picture before they might want to start toe dipping into this hot take on a new chapter of fitness, I think that doesn't get spoken about enough, that you guys articulate so well. Are we doing these things every day, or is it about just, like we sort of talked about right at the beginning, shifting our mindset that every movement matters and get clever about what you can incorporate when?
So, thank you for asking this because I think it's so important, especially in light of our conversation about how we all really can't do more. um,
Mm,
that the idea here is what we found is, and the way I'd suggest people consume the book is at the beginning, put yourself through all the tests and practices.
mm,
But what we've noticed is there's 10 tests, 10 practices, and we've noticed that everybody has some blind spots. And everybody also has some tests where they get an A on the test. And so our advice is put yourself through the tests, get some basic information about where you are on all these tests, and then focus on the areas where you have some blind spots. Because everybody's doing some things right. We work with a lot of athletes and non-athletes. And some people, well, I've never exercised in my entire life, but I already sit on the floor for 30 minutes a night or an hour a night. So I'm crushing that. And we have other people who haven't eaten a vegetable in their, in the recent memory, and they realize that's a real blind spot for them, that they're just not getting enough fiber in their diet. So we've really seen that, people use the tests as basic information, and then they focus in on the areas where they have blind spots. And then our hope is that people do treat this book like an at-home physical, and that once a year or every 6 months, you'll revisit the test, because, even in the areas where you get an A and you don't have a blind spot, you just want to make sure that you're still getting an A and don't have a blind spot. So you just want to keep an eye on those things. So whether that's your balance or your mobility or your sleep or any of the areas that we're sort of asking you to test and track. But what we've tried to do is say, here's some objective measures. Like you can be at home objectively testing yourself on these things, and you're going to do well in some areas and less well in other areas. And in the short term, you focus on the things where you need work.
Yeah, I love it. And, as we've said, it's not like the Dave Goggins stay hard kind of like super sexy Instagram message of like
Nope.
buff, and it's a really different flavor. And I think it's something probably a lot of women are looking for, because it does have a softness to it. It does still ignite a playfulness, because there's an element of challenge. And I think that's really powerful and can be powerful in a family context, like my son and I did yesterday. We try to beat each other at everything. So it's a very natural fit for us, what you guys are suggesting. But I love that, we might even, as families, couples, or with a group of friends, that we decide to make our balance bays, or whatever, appeal to the younger audience, and get together and have a morning in the park once a season, where you're like, hey, where we at? How's our balance? How's our mobility? And it could be a really fun way, as you said, humans what do we like to do together? We walk together, we move
We
together, and we
move,
eat together.
we eat together.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Mm.
those are the things that obviously it's a little more complicated than that, but that's how we spend the vast majority of our
Yeah.
time connecting with others. So man, I mean,
Mm.
even better, because human connection is so important, that if you can get together with your loved ones and your friends in a park or at home on your living room floor and say, hey, let's hold each other to account and put ourselves through these tests and meet back here in 6 months, and we'll do it again. I
Yeah.
love
And
it.
have brunch afterwards.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we knock both goals, both human connection goals off. Juliet, thanks for your work. I absolutely love what you and your husband are doing, and I think it's a really lovely way to inspire people around the world to get mobile and to actually make that fun. I feel like we don't need to do sexy. We need more fun. There needs to be more joy, because everyone can connect to that. Whereas a lot of people have a lot of trouble connecting to like hot young fitness bods, and it's so
Yeah.
far from their reality that they're like, oh, well, that's just not me, I guess. But
Yeah.
old man
Yeah.
balance test is something we can all sign up
You can
for.
all do that. Yeah.
Mm,
We're just, thank you again. I mean, we're just hoping to invite more people into this conversation. We feel like we've done a crap job in this industry of leaving people out and not making it open and welcoming and fun, like you said, and community oriented. And so, I think this book is a great place to start. And I think there's a lot of ways we can change our mindset about what counts and what works.
We sure can. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
I hope you loved today's show as much as I loved bringing it to you. I want to remind you that if you are someone who craves a low tox community that is judgment-free, full of empowerment, has health professionals and building health professionals that can support you, as well as me in there answering questions multiple times a week, I want to invite you to join the Low Tox Club. For the price of less than a cup of coffee a month, you have an annual membership for $49 Australian, so it's about $30 US or euro, that allows you to have a member masterclass every single month with a health professional or global expert from the podcast, where we have them to ourselves for an hour to ask questions and deep dive further. You have the beautiful supportive chat group. You have Q&As with me answering questions. We read books and talk about them, and a whole bunch more. You can head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the Explore tab, and join the club is the very first option on that list. Of course, we have over 10 evergreen courses that you can jump into anytime, whether it's navigating everyday low tox swaps with our Go Low Tox signature course, whether you have kids and you're wanting to know how to best support them with our Low Tox Kids course, whether you're planning a family and looking at a healthy low tox preconception journey, reducing inflammation, especially the chronic kind, with our Inflammation Ninja course, many other courses. You can again head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the courses tab, and you'll see all of the options, which includes a business course, my Low Tox Method program. A lot of people don't know, but I was doing a lot before starting Low Tox Life in 2009, and I was a business consultant across hospitality, health, retail, and cosmetics. I have been in business consulting for a very long time, so I absolutely adore helping people move into the low tox space or develop their low tox businesses. So that's a way I can support you. And then, of course, there's our wonderful social media communities at Low Tox Life on Instagram, and of course the website with over 250 gluten-free recipes, blogs, downloadable PDFs to help you navigate wanting to get rid of synthetic fragrances in your school or office. I could go on. So head to lowtoxlife.com, see what takes your interest or fancy, and thank you so much for being a part of our podcast community. I love reading your reviews. I appreciate every follow and subscribe, and I want to just remind you to finish off that if there's anything you heard that you found interesting from a medical or scientific perspective, it is intended as education only. Please always chat to a health professional who knows you and your situation best. I'll see you next week. Bye.